So in the past, I've done some work with Big Brother, Big Sister, and whatever. That being said, the most common story I tend to hear from conflicted youth is that they're raised in a single-family home, usually with a mom. Dad is either not in the picture, an alcoholic, whatever. So we have this child who is trying to seek ways to make himself healthy and empower himself in ways that a healthy father should have done so, between the formative years of like 1 to 4. So I think you know where I'm going with this. Let's say for someone who's born without like a good father figure, where would they go out in the world, or like what spheres of influence would they try to expose themselves to like gain access to that fountain of health and knowledge that a good father figure should have provided them to in the first place?
Okay, well, partly, I mean, certainly to some degree, a good mother can provide that, right? To some degree. Although it's hard for one person to be everything.
Right.
And I think one of the conundrums that face women, and this is a tough one, and this is why I think women are higher in trait agreeableness and higher in trait negative emotion, is that, the primary problem that a woman has with an infant is why not throw it out a window? Because it's very annoying, right? I mean, it's there all the time. It's constant demand. It's absolutely constant demand, tremendous dependency. And so a woman has to be tilted towards mercy. That's how it looks to me.
Right.
And especially it's so important especially the first year when children are so unbelievably vulnerable. And so I think it's very difficult for women to be merciful like that and to make the shift to encouraging disciplinarian. I think that's a very difficult thing for people to do simultaneously. Although, people, I'm not saying that women are always only merciful and men are always only encouraging disciplinarians, but things do sort themselves out to some degree like that. And I think also the biochemical transformations that accompany pregnancy and childbirth and lactation also tilt a mother towards that as well. Because she has to really love that little thing, right? It's number one, no matter what it demands. And then telling it what to do and making sure it's behaving properly, that's a whole different issue. Now, but the kids who lack fathers, I mean, first of all, they can find that to some degree in their friends. Okay. And that's often what fatherless boys do in particular. They go into gangs. And they generate the missing masculinity in the gang. Well, that's not so good because, like, what the hell do they know? Yeah. They don't know anything, right? They're just stupid kids, and they're like 15 years old, and their testosterone is pumping, and they're trying to get the hell away from their mother, which is what they're supposed to do. And they're not in the right position to exercise any authority over themselves. So that's not good. They can find it in education. They can find it in books. They can find it in movies. They can find it in sports heroes and so forth, because the image of the father is fragmented and distributed among the community. Okay. But it's very, very difficult to not have a father. Right. And one of the things that we're doing in our society, which I think it's absolutely appalling, is that we're making the case that all families are equal. It's like, sorry, no, wrong. And there's no empirical data supporting that proposition, by the way. It's much better for kids to have two parents. Okay. Now, who those parents are, that's a whole different issue. But.
Okay, and if I could just add one more thing. How would you answer that question to, let's say, a daughter who was raised without a father? Because she would obviously have different ways of finding those fragments of her missing father than, like, a boy would instead. Because obviously they're raised differently. At least they should have been.
Well, I think it's the same issue, I mean, I think that another danger that emerges, and this is Freud's, of course, famous observation, is that if there's mom and child, or father and child, that relationship can get a little closer than it should. Okay. And then the lines get blurry and mixed. And I'm not saying that happens to everyone, obviously, but it's still a danger that's inherent in the situation. They're thrust together too tightly without sufficient resources. Okay. And so the responsibility has to be distributed more. And I really do think that it's the sign of the degeneration of a society when single parenthood becomes anything approximating the norm. It's not a good idea. And part of the reason I believe that, and I think this has to do with the overwhelming selfishness of modern life, is that marriage isn't for the people who are married. It's for the children, obviously. And if you can't handle that, grow the hell up. No, I mean seriously. Yeah, okay. Seriously. Once you have kids, it is not about you. Period. Now that doesn't mean it isn't about you at all. But that just seems so self-evident to me. I can't believe that anybody would even question it.
Oh, it's been questioned.
Oh yes, well I'm certainly aware of that. Yes, it's questioned. It's almost illegal to question it now. Or illegal to make the set of propositions that I'm making. So that's the best I can do.
Yeah,
with
no,
that.
that's excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
This question is going in part to the first half of your lecture, but it's also something that's been on my mind listening to your lectures over the past few months. And that's when we talk about the psychological truth or significance of the Bible, to what extent does that psychological truth have to be embodied in specific historical events or people? And so, for instance, the thing that's sort of been bugging on my mind is there's a part that St. Paul's talking about in the New Testament somewhere in one of his letters, and he's talking about the resurrection. And he says, if it didn't happen, then this whole thing is just meaningless. The faith is meaningless. Like for him, there had to be that embodiment of that historical person or event in that case.
Well, the best answer I have to that at the moment is that I'm really happy that I'm not at that point yet in this lecture series. You know, because there's a crucial issue there, and I don't know exactly what to make of it. And my approach at the moment, as I said, is to approach this as rationally as I possibly can, and I hope I know a hell of a lot more about what I'm doing by the time I get to that particular question. And I do have the beginnings of ways to answer that, but I'm not going to answer that at all right now because it's so bloody complicated. It would just burn me to a frazzle, and I'm already mostly burnt to a frazzle after that lecture, so I couldn't attempt to even start to sketch it out. I don't know. I mean, part of it is to be just rational about it, just to be rational about it. There is something about the idea that continual death and rebirth is a necessary precondition to proper human adaptation. Like every time you learn something new, that's important. Part of the stupid old you has to die. And sometimes that can be an awful lot of you. And in fact, it can be so much of you sometimes that you just die, right? You just can't handle it. And so there is a real idea that you have to identify with the part of yourself that transcends your current personality, that can constantly die and be reborn. Now, then I could say, well, that means that all of this is psychological and symbolic. And that's the simplest answer. But I'm not satisfied with that answer, even though I think it's coherent and complete. Because the world's a very weird place, and there are things about it that we don't understand. So I can't go any farther than that at the moment. So, yeah.
Hi, Dr. Peterson. I just recently watched one of your videos of you debating with transgendered protesters at U of T free speech rally in October. And one of the protesters said to you, which was in particularly very chilling, was, why do you have the right to determine whether an individual is worthy of you using their pronouns? The scary thing to me is how common this type of view is among radical left-wing protesters on university campuses who feel they have the right to tell other people what they can think, what words they can use, and what speakers they can or cannot listen to. The even scarier part is that our government is creating legislation to back up their ideologies, which is evident through Bill C-16, M-103, and Bill 89. So my question is, what do you think the end game is in all of this? Because it seems every year...
We're in the process of finding that out. You know, and I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. We're in the process of finding that out. I think the end game that underlies all of that, in my estimation, is best summed up by Jacques Derrida's criticism of Western civilization. It's phallogocentric. Now, we've already talked about what the logos means, right? And so for Derrida, that was a sign of its utter, what would you call it? The utterly despicable, dominant nature of Western culture. Well, that's what animates the postmodernists. Now, they may not know that because an ideology gets fragmented across its adherents, and then it only acts as the coherent ideology when all those adherents come together in a mob. And then you see the animating spirit. So I think that there's a battle going on that's a battle exactly at the level that Derrida described, and that's a theological battle with a philosophical with a philosophical implications, and out of those philosophical implications come political implications. But it's not primarily political, and it's not primarily philosophical. It's deeper than that. And the postmodernists are out, their criticism was designed to be fundamental. And it also emerged out of Marxism. And let's not forget that the Marxist criticism was not only fundamental, but just about resulted in the nuclear annihilation of the world. These are not trivial issues. And we're back in the same insane boat. And so, what do I think should be done about that? Well, I've thought about that way before any of this happened. And I think that what we should do about it is we should tell the truth. Because there isn't anything more powerful than that. And that's the right theological answer. Because the spoken truth brings good into being. Well, that's the phallogocentric idea. And I'm trying to revisit that to explain to people what it means and to see if they think that's a good idea. I mean, that's what we have to figure out. Is that an idea worth adhering to or not? The alternative is see, for the postmodernists, the world is that landscape of pyramids that I described. But there's no transcendent vision that's over above that. And all of those pyramids are equally valid, and it's a war of everyone against everyone. It's like the nightmare of Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, except that it's not individuals, it's groups. And everyone's a group. You're a group. You're whatever your group is. It's like, that's death, as far as I'm concerned. It's utterly reprehensible. And we better sort it out, because if we don't sort it out, we are bloody well going to pay for it. So,
Thank you.